Evening, everybody. It's so wonderful to see all of you. I am now Dr. Elizabeth Dutta. I finally got my doctorate. And since I last saw you last year at our last storytelling show, I got my doctorate in health policy. Timely, I'd say. And my best kept secret is this. I found what my undergraduate professor in history told me to be true. He said, you get a bachelor's when you think you know something. You get your master's when you realize you don't know anything. And you get your doctorate when you realize no one else knows anything either. It's comforting. Welcome back to PCC's annual storytelling show. Again, it's just so wonderful to see you all. Thank you so much for coming out to support us in the fantastic work that the Primary Care Coalition does. I'm sure we can all agree that the work that the Primary Care Coalition does in collaboration with its many partners is more important now than ever. It's work to support the most vulnerable in our community, to ensure access to health care and social services, to uphold their dignity, and to protect their rights. So I am just very honored to be here tonight in supporting PCC. And so thrilled to introduce you to our storytellers. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsors this evening, Alpha Specialty Pharmacy, Care First, and NIH Federal Credit Union. We wouldn't be able to host this event without them, so many thanks to our sponsors. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our first storyteller. She came to PCC for a shorter commute. 10 years later, she's now serving as PCC's Chief Operating Officer, and we are so grateful to have her in this leadership position. Please welcome to the stage, Hilary Sumba.
You know that feeling you get when someone's watching you? That hair standing on the back of your neck uneasy feeling? That's the feeling I have now. I'm standing at the checkout counter of a small corner shop in Kampala, Uganda. I've gone in to buy some fresh pineapple and coconut because the Caribbean is not the only place in the world to make a great piña colada. And I just know I'm being watched. From the dark corner at the back of the shop, where guys from the neighborhood gather to listen to the soccer game on the radio, I can feel this piercing stare. And as I turn to exit with my fresh fruit in hand, I know that outside it's a sunny Saturday afternoon, but my subconscious has me convinced that I will be walking through a darkened parking lot in the middle of the night. I hunch my shoulders, I gaze toward the floor as I move to the exit. I am in full fight or flight mode. But as I approach the door, out of the corner of my eye, I catch sight of this man's face as a grin lightens his face, his eyes brighten, and he declares the great insight that has just landed. Aha! It's a half-caste! In Zimbabwe, where I grew up, the term for a half-caste or a person of mixed heritage is... Wait. Is this a safe space? Will I get canceled if I say it? The word is colored. I am colored. That's it. That's my secret. I know you're not supposed to say that in this country, but it is who I am. And it's a strange kind of existence, never being able to describe yourself in your own way. When I was very young, I was protected from this quirk of my identity by my mom and a half dozen of her friends, other white American women who had married Black Zimbabweans and formed a play group for their children. It was really a support group for themselves. The Brown Kids Group. And so in this bubble, I didn't really realize that there was anything unusual about me and my family. not even when the doctoral anthropology student who was working on her thesis came to interview all of us brown kids about what it was like to be a brown kid. Nothing registered for me that there was anything weird about us. If anything, I thought she was the weird one. Why would she want to study us? There are far more interesting things in the world. Yeah. When I went to school, my perspective began to shift. Now, I have to say, Harare in the 1990s was a pretty idyllic place, a lot like Montgomery County in many ways. It was wonderfully diverse with people from all different parts of the world, many, many different backgrounds. But not many people had mixed backgrounds. And so in primary school, I didn't really see many other people who looked like me and began to feel like being a half caste would always make me kind of an outcast. I wasn't really left out, though. In fact, I was welcomed with lots of different groups. And without knowing it, I kind of became the anthropologist myself. I'd ask, how is playing at recess with these kids different than playing with those other kids last week? How do they talk about one another? How does their behavior change when someone from the other group is around? And later, how are these differences connected to history in ways that drive hatred and division? My best friend at school was the daughter of a farmer. And I remember spending weekends on the farm. We would climb rocks and run in the fields, play hide and seek in the barns. It was a commercial farm with a staff of about 150 people, all of whom were also living and raising their families on the farm. So there was a small school and a clinic. It was a prosperous little community. But prosperity for a white-run farm in Zimbabwe in the 1990s was a dangerous thing. Politically motivated land reform sought to reassign these lands to veterans of the Liberation War, and white families were forcibly and violently removed. My friend's farm was taken and burned to the ground. So were her father's hands. They were literally taken by a man with a machete so that he could never work on that land again. White privilege is very real, but it's not always an advantage. Like when the white family that has worked on land for generations is literally run off by an angry mob. It's not right. Years later, I moved to the United States to further my education and added immigrant to my already half-caste identity. And still seeking that place of belonging, I joined the African Heritage Students Group at my liberal New England campus. And I joined in time for the meeting where I saw the white South African exchange students voted out of the group for not being African enough. That's not right. Are these types of racism really so different to, like, the time my sister's boyfriend couldn't buy that BMW that he really wanted and had earned? He had a signing bonus, but he didn't want to have to deal with constantly being pulled over for driving while black? That's not right. Or how often we see people who can't get the services they need and are entitled to because the information just isn't available in their language. It's just not right. Now, I've never had to experience these forms of racism directly. I'm half-caste, but I witness it all the time. How history's injustices drive hatred and contempt for the innocent people who are standing in front of us right now today. And that's why the equity-focused work we do at Primary Care Coalition is so important, because we look past our differences and focus on healing. Yes, clinically, but also culturally. We understand that those differences are actually complements. And we are so much stronger and better together, like peanut butter and chocolate or tomato and basil. But the recipe is not easy to come by. It takes a lot of work. It takes time and patience and intentionality to have the hard conversations that people might not be ready to have, and to openly listen to what you might not be ready to hear. It takes bravery for the half-caste girl to stand up and say she's colored, not to offend anybody else, but just because that's who she is. And it takes strength to listen with an open mind, broaden your perspective, and hopefully broaden the perspective of others along the way. So I used to think that being a half-caste would always make me an outcast, but it's kind of a gift. I'm half-caste, not entirely one or the other, always welcome, but never fully belonging. It provides a certain perspective and a way of translating between different groups to build understanding. It took years, but now I realize that that fear of never relating to anyone is the source of my superpower. I'm half-caste. I can relate to everyone.
Bravo, Hillary. Thank you. Can you imagine an anthropologist coming to your kindergarten and studying you? That's incredible. One of the many programs that the Primary Care Coalition supports is the Montgomery Cares program, which serves over 30,000 low-income, uninsured individuals in Montgomery County every year in partnership with Safety Net Primary Care Clinics, the Nexus Montgomery hospitals, private providers, school-based health centers. It's really an incredible program, and of course we couldn't do it without our partnership with the Montgomery County government, and we're so grateful for the support, especially of our Health and Human Services Committee of the Montgomery County Council, and that's why I'm so pleased to welcome our next storyteller. Please welcome County Council member Gabe Albornoz.
Good evening, good people. So this is a lot cheaper than therapy. And after the week we've had, I'm sure we could all use some. It is truly a privilege and honor to be with all of you this evening. And my story takes place in the year 2004. Let's go back to 2004. I wish we could go back to 2004. Then State Senator from Illinois, Barack Obama, gave his speech before the Democratic National Convention. That summer, I asked my wife to marry me. And in January, we will be celebrating 20 years together. That summer, I was also working for an unbelievable organization called the Latin American Youth Center. LAYC, for those of you that don't know, is one of the OGs of nonprofit organizations in the District, Maryland, and Virginia. They literally wrote the book on youth development and how to engage our newly arriving communities. They were located and still are in Columbia Heights, and at the time were primarily serving young people that lived in the Mount Pleasant and Columbia Heights areas. They were led by an extraordinary woman named Lori Kaplan, who to this day was my most important and beloved mentor. That summer, LAYC was going through a lot of changes. There was a great deal of gentrification that was going on in Columbia Heights that was pushing families out to the suburbs. I grew up in Montgomery County, the proud son of two immigrants from South America, and I was on the senior leadership team of LAYC. And the only person that knew their way around Maryland. Lori had the foresight and the vision to understand that the need that they were helping to fill was spreading out around the entire region. And so she set me on this course with nothing more than my 15-year-old Volkswagen Jetta and a concept of an idea to get our program started in Montgomery and Prince George's County. And so for about 6 months, I worked out of my car, met with elected officials, met with nonprofit leaders, and was really able to understand the community. And within those travels, we settled on Langley Park as our home. Langley Park for generations has been the destination spot for immigrant communities. And at that time, there was significant gang violence. The transatlantic gangs MS-13 and 18th Street had taken hold of the entire region and were wreaking absolute havoc, terrifying families, separating families, families who had fled their countries of origin to escape gang violence were being met with it right in their own backyards. It was a scary time. And while we were in Langley Park, as I arrived, there was very little trust in the community. But that summer was a particularly violent one. And after we had opened up our first offices in Langley Park, a young 19-year-old man named Sebastian walked through our door. Sebastian was wearing a white t-shirt and a blue bandana. His fingernails on either side were unusually long, markings of a gang member of MS-13. But Sebastian had a twinkle in his eye. He had clear leadership skills that were born. He was an extraordinarily smart young man. He had come to the country by himself when he was 14 years old, fleeing violence from El Salvador, coming to meet a father he had not seen since he was 5 years old, only to discover that his father had started a new family and had children and did not want Sebastian in his house, and so he kicked him out. Sebastian came to LAYC looking for love and support, but at that time, there was chaos in the community. There was very little trust among police, among youth workers, among schools, among the people who were on the ground trying desperately to save the lives of these children. It was a chaotic time. Although I grew up on the mean streets of Bethesda, I had not experienced gang violence before. But to be fair, I did grow up on the east side of Bethesda. But my superpower at that time was bringing people together. And so I took it upon myself to meet Sergeant George Norris, who was the head of the gang unit in Prince George's County at the time. Somebody who was hardened and had seen a lot, had been through a lot, and was really rough around the edges. But I knew that inside of Sergeant Norris was somebody who was really dedicated to helping our community. And so over the course of time, I developed a relationship with Sergeant Norris. We became friends. And we started something called the Gang Intervention Partnership. We invited stakeholders, youth workers, people who were on the ground, people who were interacting with these kids every day, and we got them in a room and we got them to trust each other. Information started to flow. Communication opened up. Trust was built. And it was around that time, as I was mentoring Sebastian, that I really just was impressed with his presence and what I knew his potential could be and was. But one Friday night, around 4:30, I was tired. It had been a long week. I wanted to go home. And I got a knock on my door. It was Sebastian. And he looked awful. He was very emotional. Something clearly had happened to him. And I asked him to sit down. and let me know what was going on. After what felt like hours but minutes of silence, he began to open up. And he said, I saw something last night. I said, Sebastian, what did you see? Silence, tears, shivering, shaking. Sebastian, what did you see? My friend was murdered in front of me last night, in front of our apartment complex. And I didn't stop it. I didn't know what to do. So, after giving Sebastian a hug, telling him that everything was going to be okay, even though I didn't know whether or not that was true, I called Sergeant George Norris. And I said, Sergeant Norris, we have a situation. Sebastian was present at a double homicide last night. Sergeant Norris came over, brought members of the detective unit from Prince George's County, and because of the trust that I had established with him, I knew that he was going to be looking out for what was in the best interest of Sebastian, that he would take care of him. Sebastian ended up serving as a key witness to, at the time, bring down one of the most violent cliques of MS-13 in our region. And it was his testimony that helped bring down that clique. He then was put in witness protection, and I didn't think I would ever see Sebastian again. But about 6 years ago, I was invited to a fundraising event for my campaign at a local country club. And it was a great event, well attended, shook a bunch of hands, raised a good amount of money. And as the event was ending, I saw somebody in the back of the room. Somebody I recognized, but had facial hair. And he came over and he shook my hand and he said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "I remember you, Sebastian." Sebastian is doing great. He is now the head groundskeeper of one of our local country clubs. He has a staff of 9 people that report to him. He has 2 children in our Montgomery County public school system. He is thriving. What that experience taught me was that regardless of the challenges that we face, no matter how dire the circumstances we find ourselves in, there is always hope. There are always people willing to help. And it also taught me that none of us can do any of our work by ourselves. And it may take time, but it's important to build that trust so that we can help people like Sebastian.
Thank you so much. I'm moving to Montgomery County this weekend, so duly noted, I will be sure to avoid Bethesda. So, a note taken. Next up, we have another PCC team member. This is his first time speaking publicly in front of his wife and children. Please welcome Hasib Shinwari.
What on earth have I done? Yeah, this is what I was thinking on August 14, 2021, when the Afghan government collapsed, literally collapsed. Everything was scrambling around us, and I could feel the danger is closing on me and my family. The same people who were targeting me because of my work were now in control. Me and my family were hiding, and the situation was very tough. But it wouldn't happen if we chosen to leave Afghanistan in 2018. Back in 2018, me and my family were approved for special immigrant visa because of my work with the US government-funded project in Afghanistan. But me and my family, we took a difficult decision and we decided to stay a bit longer in Afghanistan. This was the time I was appointed as a director of education, and I was deeply committed to work for quality education, and especially for female and women education and women empowerment. My wife, Najia, fully supported me in this mission. And we both believe that every society needs quality education and especially women empowerment, and especially Afghanistan society needs this a lot. So we stayed there, and because of my work, I faced different target, and I was targeted in different areas. I remember the extremists sent a suicide bomb blaster to my office, and I had to jump from the window of the 3rd floor. I hardly broken my feet, but I survived. In 2021, when the government overran, we understand that it's not possible to stay here anymore. We were hiding in the underground, and the only thing we were thinking about how to escape the country. With the support of my farmer colleagues, I was able to fly to Qatar, and we were live in a US military camp, which was built for Afghan refugees. Living in the camp was tough. Me, my wife, and my 2 daughters, we were given a small room with very limited privacy, and we had a limited access to resources. I remember one day my elder daughter, she asked me that, "What month is it?" I said, "It's December." She get excited. She said, "Oh, this is December, this is my birthday month, and we will have a birthday party on the 19th. I looked to my wife, her broken, and we didn't have anything to celebrate that birthday. So I lied to my daughter and I said, "No, it's September actually," and I was wrong. And she's sitting here. The situation was very tough, but after 6 long months, we were able to come to the safety of the United States, to the beautiful, sunny California. But soon we realized and we found that starting a new life here is more difficult than what we expected. We need to rent a house, and renting a house or buying a house for a new immigrant with no credit history and with no rent record is almost impossible. One day we met someone, a friend of friend. Her name is Brenda Smith. And when she heard about our struggles, she immediately offered that I will co-sign the lease agreement for you. Not only co-signed the lease agreement, but she used her connection to furnish the house for us. And this was a huge deal. This came as a miracle. And now we call Brenda as our American mom. Now that we got a roof on our head, we started thinking about a job. I started applying to different positions and attended different interviews. One day I received a call for an interview. I attended the interview, and the evening of that day I received the offer for the job. I was so excited. My family was so excited. And I took my family for the dinner out. But soon after, one day I got a text message from the company, and they were asking for my bank details. They said, "I want to send you some money to buy your office equipments." And this raised some red flag. The text message raised some red flag. When I discussed this with one of my friends, and we found that it's a scam. and they just want my bank details to steal my money. But the joke is on the scammer, if they would see how little amount I have in my account. I was very disappointed. I lost my confidence, and I thought I will never get a real job in the United States. But meanwhile, my wife kept me going, and she said, okay, now it's my time to work on my dreams. She was always interested to work in Afghanistan, but due to the security situation, she was kept away from directly working in the field. I started teaching her the driving. Oh, half of my hair's white after teaching her the driving. Several days, our session ended with heated arguments, and I remember we were fighting on. I was asking her to use the brake a lot, and she was saying, "You're pressurizing me in the middle of the street." She was stopping the car, and I was sitting in the passenger seat like this. But finally, after 1 month struggle, she was able to get her license. And this was her biggest dream, to drive the car, because back in Afghanistan, female are not driving that much. After she got her driving license, then I worked with her on her resume and worked with her how she can get a job. She was very interested to get a job as a teacher. And finally, she got a job before me as a teacher in the United States. It was excitement for her, and it was a nervous situation for her as well, because she was going to a new environment and working with new people. That was nervous for her. But that gave me some motivation, and that gave me some hope. I start again my job search and applied to different positions. I received a call from Roswell Area Chamber of Commerce, and they asked me, you applied for the workforce coordinator position. Honestly, I didn't remember I applied to this position, because I was applying to lots of positions every day. I was searching for the job. But I said, yes, I have applied. I went to the interview. The CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, Rana, was sitting in the interview. And I remember she was looking to me and she said, you know, when I'm looking to you, it reminds me my past. I'm also an immigrant to this country. And your interview just remind me my first interview and my first job in the United States. And she said, congratulations, we are offering this job. So this time it was a real job. I was so excited. I just wanted to leave the room and to call my wife that I got a real job this time. But she told me, no, you sit down and I want to explain some more. This was the point. This was a big turning point in our life. And working with the Roswell Area Chamber of Commerce, gaining some experience in the workforce development, led me to work with the PCC and work with the immigrants, and especially with the women, and empowering women to navigate the U.S. job market and serve the community. It took 6 years, 7,000 miles, and more than $600 in our account, but we are where we need to be. Thank you very much.
Hasib, PCC is so lucky to have you as their workforce development manager. And, you know, in your wife's defense, this is not the easiest place to drive either. So well done, well done. We're so grateful that you're a part of the PCC family now. Up next is a very special storyteller. We heard from his partner last year. You may remember LaTanya Rich from the Tree of Hope Association and her story. Among the many services and programs that the Primary Care Coalition supports is behavioral health. Services to support people that are recovering from addiction and suffering from mental illness. And for so many years at the Primary Care Coalition, it was my absolute pleasure to work with LaTanya, who is a certified peer recovery specialist and a certified supervisor, and has as a peer is someone who has lived experience of behavioral health condition themselves and supports somebody in their own recovery by sharing their story and their lived experience. And it's just such an incredibly powerful form of support and so crucial in people's recovery. So they just do extraordinary work. So I'm so pleased tonight that we get to hear from her other half, Ed Bunny Rich. We get to hear from your partner in life, love, and recovery. Please welcome to the stage, Ed Bunny Rich.
I went to a disco when I was 20 and didn't get back until I was 43. I graduated from Holy Cross College in '76, came home to DC to work right at the height of disco era. Some of you may remember that. Y'all remember that song, I know. And they had discos every night of the week. There was somewhere to go every night of the week, even Sunday night. Not only that, there were discos during the week at noon during lunchtime. It was called the midday disco. Tuesdays and Thursdays in downtown DC, right where I worked. So every Tuesday and Thursday, in addition to almost every night, I went to the disco and then staggered back into work, tipsy, and continued my day, as much of it as I could. And this went on for years and years. As you know, the mid-'70s all the way up until probably, the '80s, early '80s, there were disco club era. And I loved it. I loved it. I had money, I was working, and I had freedom. So, the dancing, the dressing up, the music, the women, always a bunch of women. And yeah, it was a fun time for a while. But as you can imagine, every day drinking, hanging out, that started to lead to other things and opened up the door for experimentation with other drugs. And after a while, it was just more about, it used to be when I first started, the disco was the destination, right? But then the disco became just the place to go to get started. And many places after that were destinations. So, yeah, as you can imagine, I didn't keep the job. And this went on for years, series of jobs, because it was more important to me hang out and do other things, get high. And so after years and years, a job just wasn't that much, it wasn't a big deal anymore. I was caught in the grip, really, of the addiction and alcoholism and everything else that went with it, the lifestyle, or lack of a lifestyle, that too. To the point where years later, I found myself just walking the streets, using drugs, alcohol, walking the streets, no job. Eventually, I found one day a little cove of trees near the DC line. And it had a little archway, and I went up in there, and I was just laying in the bushes. And I was excited about finding this place. One of the key characteristics of addiction and alcoholism is separation and isolation. And by that time, I just didn't want to be around anyone. And so that's where I used to go and lay and drink and get high, whatever, by myself. And one day, I was laying in there, and this guy comes stumbling in. And he passes out and he falls down, and I'm mad, I'm cussing. I'm cussing him out. I'm like, this drunk bum. You know, it was almost like he came into my living room and fell out on my living room floor. But then, in a matter of seconds, I realized I'm laying in the bushes. I'm a drunk bum. And then I started tearing up and sobbing. And I realized, I was like, how did I get here? What happened to my life? You know, I once had so much promise. I was the golden child. Come home from college, I was gonna do all these things. My mother was so proud of me. She raised me as a single mom. She was a school teacher. And then here I am, a bum. And I just started sobbing and crying. I was like, God, how did I get here? All I could think to pray was, God, help me. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what it would entail. I just knew I needed to ask intuitively. It's like I just need to ask for help. That's all I knew. I didn't know what the help would be. I passed out. You know, I never went to sleep. I never fell asleep. I just passed out most of the time. And I got up the next day, and next thing you know, I was gone again. Saw one of my buddies on the street, and I was gone again. I forgot about the prayer. But God didn't forget the prayer. About a week later, I got arrested in Silver Spring, right up here on Cameron. He sent the angels. He sent the angels. They just had Montgomery County uniforms on with guns on their hips. And that put me squarely in the path of recovery. I didn't think so much of it at the time. You know, I wasn't happy about it then, but in retrospect, it was a great day. And I ended up at the treatment center, Avery Road Treatment Center up here in Rockville, and I started to learn about recovery. The problem was that I had a college degree, so I didn't need anybody else to tell me anything. You know, I didn't need a mentor, or as we call it in recovery, a sponsor. I know that I could do this on my own. I mean, everything was in English. I didn't need a translator. And yeah, I could read and I could listen. And so I didn't need any, well, not following directions, I ended up back out there again. And just going on my own thinking, back out there again. So back and forth. Then finally I made it back. I had to make it back. I drugged myself back in. And I finally got a mentor or a sponsor. I started following directions. One of the things he stressed, which is the reason why I'm here today, and my life changed, is getting a service position. Getting a service, as a matter of fact, he called it a service commitment in the 12-step rooms in the meetings. That counteracts my disease right at its core. My disease of addiction, alcoholism, is rooted in self-centeredness. So if we can attack that disease right at its core, self-centeredness, and helping somebody else, doing something for somebody else, then you can get better. You stop thinking so much of yourself and think about helping others. And that's what happened. That's what happened. God heard my prayer. He sent the angels. He eventually sent the sponsor. And before I knew it, I did service work, got 2 or 3 service positions. As a matter of fact, I ended up one time I had 5 service positions, all these different things I was doing. H&I, hospitals, institutions, going to jails and all that stuff. And I still go there. And somebody told me, well, you might want to, just scale back a little bit, because we do things to extremes sometimes. So, but anyway, I got about 2 or 3 years and I was doing fine. I was doing fine. And then I had a little relationship I was in. But then she came. my beautiful future wife. But at the time, I didn't know that. She came in and to the meetings, and I was impressed with her because she stayed after and asked to be and started getting involved in service. And me having been around a while, I felt connected to her immediately, and it was good, you know, it was good to see someone new looking to do something to counteract their disease and to help other people. And so we, you know, she did some service with me, but, you know, we were just friends. We used to call and talk, and I just thought we'd be friends. But we connected, and I could see where there was a connection. We liked each other. We talked a lot on the phone. And then we went one day on to a service commitment, and it ended up being a date. We ended up going to the movies afterwards, you know. And then one day when I walked in this meeting, she don't want me to tell this part, right? This is the good part. She said, but I walked in a meeting and I saw her, you know, and she smiled and I smiled, and it was just, you know it was a connection there. And I sat behind her, and it was in the summertime, so she had on, you know, a sleeveless or a topless, you know, like the shoulders off. What do you call it? Like a shoulders off top, right? In summer. Yeah. And I sat behind her. I was looking at her shoulders, man, and they were just so beautiful, man. They were just like they were the most beautiful shoulders I've ever seen. You know what I mean? And the skin was so smooth. This is the best kept secret because she told me not to tell this, right? Man, I just knew, you know, we were going to be together. And by that time, she had been in a relationship, and as someone pointed out, you know, from her story last year, you know, I'm her second husband, somebody pointed out that. And so she was done with that, and I was done with my relationship. And so we started dating. But we had to ask our mentors, our sponsor, because you're not supposed to date early in your recovery. You're supposed to focus on you. But our sponsors knew each other, and they knew us, and they said, yeah, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. We got the okay, man. We got the go ahead, man. And I'm telling you, man, everything. I think we're gonna do it anyway, if you say, you know. But yeah, man, and and it's been a beautiful thing ever since then. We've been working in service, doing service together. We've been together 24 years, right? 24 years. Yeah. And we're coming up on our 18th in about a month, our 18th wedding anniversary, you know? So yeah, it's a love story. It's a love story, and I always think about that prayer again. I think when I asked God, you know, help me, when he sent her to me, that was part of that help. That was still part of the prayer. And so we live a life of love and service and commitment to helping others. And man, we've been on that journey for, like I said, some time. We both went back to work for Avery Road Treatment Center, which both of us came through. We worked there, full circle back there. And then we started an organization there called Avery Road Alumni Association. And that was to show people who are in the treatment now, or at that time, that people bring them back to show them people whose lives have been changed, because they might not see us. You know, we've gone about our lives. We've gone out there in the world and become productive citizens again. And so we brought to be able to bring it back so they could see us and get lived experience from us, peers. We talked about that. The peer movement came, and we started doing a lot of things. We started the organization, and other people wanted to join, but they weren't in Avery Road in the umbrella, so we changed the name to Tree of Hope Association so that people would feel included. Everybody could join. Then Tree of Hope, just real quick, there was a tree out behind Avery Road that people used to take their shoes, their old shoes, tie shoestrings together, throw the shoes up in the tree, symbolizing leaving the old way of walking behind and walking out of the treatment center in a new pair of shoes, or a different pair of shoes, and a new way of life. So that's the symbolism of Tree of Hope Association. And we knew we had to change the name, and we had a board meeting, and one time, and one of the board members looked at the logo we had with the shoes hanging off, and off the limbs, shoe tree, off the branches, and he said, "That's the Tree of Hope." And everybody looked at each other and said, "Yes, that is the Tree of Hope." So now today we were able to, after many years of riding around, working out of our car and out of our home. My car looked like just had stuff all over the back seats and front seats and everything. We would go to different organizations. Many community organizations allowed us to use their space, in the meantime. But just in the past couple of years, we were able to finally open up our own drop-in recovery center right in the heart of Rockville, right across the street from the courthouse. As God would have it, he was still answering prayers again. Allowed a space to come open for us right across from the old courthouse at 30 Courthouse Square. So we have a drop-in community center. Peer work is being done there. We're able to connect with all of the different agencies and organizations in the county and do, even now, youth work in the schools, which is so very important. So at PCC, we've been able to connect with them and just every organization in the county. Thanks, and Gabe Arbonaz, everybody's helped us in the county council. This is a great, great county to be in terms of services and people that care about helping each other. So now we are continue to dance to the beat of life, of recovery, and of love, and we're just moving on. We're just moving on to the beat of love. We like dancing, and so what I want to say to you is, you should be dancing too. Thank you.
God sent you LaTonya in a tube top? What an extraordinary journey. And it's been such a privilege to work with Tree of Hope. And you're an inspiration to everyone, not just those in recovery. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Next up, another individual who's been inspiring to me. I met her when I formed the Dream Team with the Department of Health and Human Services when the county was addressing on an emergency basis a terrible, terrible crisis of youth fentanyl use, especially in the Wheaton, Glenmont, and Aspen Hill areas. And then Director of Behavioral Health and Crisis Services, Rolando Santiago, said, "Elizabeth, I'm wondering if you can help organize these meetings. There's an organization called Identity, and we've brought them in to do a pilot project to try to help these kids." And that's when I met our next storyteller, Nora Morales. She said that telling a story on stage was on her bucket list. So please give her a warm welcome, Nora Morales.
Well, I believe the best kept secret is that there are angels living among us. I know, you don't believe me, but I can prove it. My first encounter with angels was when I was 3 years old in Mexico City. I have blurry images of myself in a back seat with my father, people screaming, my mother crying. That night, my father was arrested as a political prisoner. And in a time when activists were being murdered, my mother decided to flee. She had received a postcard from a friend in Chicago of a sunny day and the skylight behind her, with the Sears Tower in the background. So with the tourist visa and one suitcase between us, we decided to leave our homeland. Now, if any of you have ever been in Chicago in the month of March, you know that postcard was a fraud. Yeah. Unfortunately, my mom and her friend got into a fight, and soon thereafter, we became homeless. Chicago that year lived up to its moniker as the Windy City. The wind howled so hard that it burned my ears, and my hands turned a rosa mexicano pink as my fingers lost sensation. Barreling towards us on the sidewalk was this man screaming, "Señora, ¿qué está haciendo? Do you not know it's cold? Why are you not wearing coats?" My mother immediately burst into tears. Feeling bad, he invited us into the cafe we were standing in front of and heard my mother's story. I liked Casper. Yes, like the friendly ghost, but more importantly, like an angel. He had a warm smile, kind eyes, and a mustache just like my father. He had just been to the dry cleaners and picked up his family's coats, and he immediately gifted them to us. Mine was burgundy with a black and white fur collar, and it made me feel like a princess. It was the first present I received in the US, and it would be my warmest companion for the next 2 years. Still skeptical, huh? Okay. Maybe one Casper story isn't going to convince you. But how about nuns? No? Any takers? Okay, listen. I'm Catholic, or better yet, I'm a recovering Catholic. I went to Head Start in a Catholic church. Now, if you know anything about nuns, you know that they are strict and mean. I mean, they believe that humans need to suffer in order to get into heaven. You know what I'm talking about? All right. But despite this reputation, they invited me into the warmth of their abbey every day after school because they knew I was homeless. They offered me warm milk and cookies and even encouraged me to watch Sesame Street so I could learn English. I went from thinking English sounded fuchila to knowing that C is for cookie, and it's good enough for me. For the next 2 years, I became a devout Catholic because church was the place where I could feel safe and warm. See, angels on earth. Now, I'm not claiming that I could conjure up angels at any time I wanted. I'm not a bruja. But nor would I say that angels were present all the time, or that I would even know their names, all their names as I was growing up. As a matter of fact, there's a very dark period of time in my life where I had all but forgotten about angels. After 3 years of living in Chicago, my mom decided to move us to Chula Vista, California, because as she said, sin casa, pero con sol sería mejor. Without a house, but with a little bit of sun, it would be better. So we moved 15 minutes away from the San Diego-Tijuana border. Now, my mother was a traditional Mexican woman, and she forced me to wear traditional Mexican outfits my first day of school. She braided my hair in crazy hairstyles, and you know, have you ever seen the crazy things that Mexicans wear? Or the stuff they put in their hair? Yeah, I was really popular with the kids. I became the target of bullying and in many of the schools that I went to. Yes, many schools, because I was still poor and housing unstable, and I had moved 38 times by the time I turned 18. And went to 3 different high schools. I grew up in the hood, Cali style. Roosters and goats wandered our dirt streets, and the cholas and vatos ruled the neighborhood. This was the height of school integration. I traveled 2 hours each day to go to the best schools. One day, coming off the school bus, a group of middle school cholas jumped me, leaving me unconscious on the sidewalk because I had dared to go to the white school. I will never know the name of the angel that called the ambulance that day, or how I ended up in the hospital 3 days later, all alone because my mother was out hustling for food. At the age of 13, this started an intense self-hatred and shame to be Mexican. It was the height of the Reagan era, and he was busy building his 14-mile tortilla wall into the ocean. I remember thinking, God, these gringos must really hate us to violate the ocean spirits this way. Under the pressure of bullying and racism, I became suicidal. Luckily, my mother noticed what was happening, and she took us to Mexico. There, I traveled and saw Las Pirámides de Teotihuacan and connected with my Aztec roots and the centuries of civilizations that they had built. I gulped down stories about Quetzalcoatl and Xochiquetzali and the Virgin of Guadalupe as a thirsty wanderer in a Sonoran desert. I never again felt shame to be Mexican. My ancestors, mis ángeles, had saved my life. As my family grew more stable, my mother got into UC San Diego and moved us to La Jolla, California. Now, dressed as a Mexican folkloric dancer, I started my first day in 10th grade at the public high school. My mother had dropped me off at the student gate, and we had seen two gringas smoking cigarettes with mini skirts. And by 3 p.m. that day, she came back and had me interview at La Jolla Country Day School. Because as she would say, no hija mía is going to be in a school with hoodlums. So I was lucky that Miss Smith instantly liked me, and I became the first scholarship student of the school. Suddenly, I went to school where being smart was cool, and I was surrounded by kids who wanted to go to college. I had been a swimmer since the age of 6, and I had always wanted to swim competitively. But the goggles, the Speedos, and the swim meet fees were too much for my family to pay. That's when I met Fred. He would be my sponsor and my surrogate father until 3 years ago when he passed away. Fred was the adult in my life who had loved me unconditionally. And through his support of my swimming, I got to meet the recruiter for Tufts University. Because you see, they were looking for a butterfly swimmer, and I just happened to be looking for a place to spread my wings. I got a full scholarship to Tufts University, my ticket out of generational poverty. Now I can tell you many more stories of many more angels I've met along the way, like Jean Mayer, who was pivotal in passing the free and reduced price school meals policy that allowed me to eat 2 meals a day when my mom couldn't feed me. Or my friend Ever, who whisked me away to an informational meeting for Teach for America. But you get the picture. These angels helped inspire me and give me hope when I had none. They also fueled my passion to serve youth and families that look like me. My job at Identity helps me provide joy and the privilege to serve my community every day. Because one day, I want to grow up and be somebody's angel too. Thank you.
Nora, I think all of the kids that you worked with in the last year can say that you and your team have been angels to them. So thank you so much for your story and for the incredible work that you're doing to help kids who are struggling with addiction and so many other challenges and their families. Thank you. Our last storyteller this evening is a beloved colleague. When I first came to the Primary Care Coalition in 2017 and I worked with the Montgomery Cares program, I met him at Proyecto Salud. He is the executive director and a good friend. I'd like to introduce Dr. Cesar Palacios. Please welcome him to the stage.
I thought to myself, this couldn't be, this cannot be possible. I was raised in a very religious family, and early on, I knew their expectations for me, to study hard, to become a professional, to marry a nice girl from a good family. I remember the words of my grandmother. She would say, for example, the best word is the one not said, to emphasize to be reserved, polite, and to be diplomatic. She was a self-made, independent person, and in many ways, she was a woman ahead of her time, at least for last century's Guatemalan standards. When she divorced her military husband, my grandfather, she raised my mother and my uncles by herself. When I was ready to start medical school, the civil war in Guatemala was a decades-long war that killed more than 200,000 people by the time it ended in 1996. So my grandmother told me not to say my opinions about the government or the army. And it was for a good reason. The guerrillas and the army, they were fighting at times in the city, killing dissident students and professionals, but most of the time they were fighting in the countryside. Massacres and violence against the Mayan villages, they were not often shown in the news. So becoming a doctor was my way to help the suffering in Guatemala. I remember an earthquake in Guatemala that killed more than 20,000 people. And it made a big impression on me as a small kid, seeing the wounded and dead bodies covered in white blankets on the streets. Well, in medical school, it was really clear to me that poverty and lack of access to essential services made many kids sick and die due to preventable diseases like gastrointestinal infections, respiratory infections. I saw how maternal mortality devastated many families. All of these experiences motivated me to continue my graduate studies in social sciences and to start working for international development organizations that fight poverty and strive to bring essential services to low-income and middle-income countries. As luck would have it, I met a very amazing person while working in the small villages of Guatemala, a Peace Corps volunteer working in small business development, somebody that truly believed that education was the key to progress, a traveler who enjoyed learning about new cultures, a well-rounded person that you could talk with about any topic. We realized that we had a lot of things in common and we shared the core values guiding our lives. But there was a little problem. He was a man. So I thought, this couldn't be, this cannot be possible. Being gay in Guatemala can put you at risk of violence. And also it created a big crisis in me between the growing up learning of the church and the moral values and my newly found personal dimension. But thankfully, realizing that we love each other, we started to sort out our options to be together. And our best option, we decided, was to live in the United States. So we moved to the United States. It wasn't easy for me to leave my family, my friends, a job that I love, and start all over again. I took all the steps to become a professional here, starting by taking courses in college of English and business courses, preparing to take the graduate record examination and the TOEFL tests, getting a graduate degree in public health and global health policy. I did some work for World Bank and PAHO, but I wasn't getting the responses to jobs I applied to, even though I knew I could perform well in those jobs. And at the time, it felt like employers couldn't see beyond me being an immigrant with an accent. So I thought that I needed to have more studies just to get the professional job that I was looking for. I was about to start a doctoral program at Johns Hopkins when I was called to a second interview, and then I got a job offer that I accepted. I was thrilled to start working for Proyecto Salud Clinic and to use the set of skills, knowledge, and work experiences that I had. At Proyecto, we find many morbidities that could be preventable, and at least it can be mitigated if they are found early. But, the conditions that we live in, the discrimination, barriers, language barriers, poverty, make a lot of negative impact in the health outcomes in this community. It was the same way I saw the Mayan people back in Guatemala with these negative impacts in their lives because of these factors being the same. So I thought that basically working in healthcare gave me the possibility to serve the community, having the immigrant background in understanding the challenges that they face. Montgomery County has very progressive policies and programs. Montgomery Cares, project to participate on that, Care for Kids, and the impressive county response to the pandemic. Proyecto was a partner in this work. So we provided thousands of COVID tests, COVID vaccinations, case management, and wraparound services to mostly immigrant and minority populations. The award-winning communications campaign, La Abuelina, really resonated with me because of the special place grandmas, las abuelitas, have in the community. In retrospect, all worked out much better than I expected, thank God. The same Peace Corps volunteer full of dreams and plans I met back in Guatemala a long time ago is now my husband. It's something that we couldn't believe possible in our lifetimes. We adopted two beautiful kids, Asher and Finn, and a life that I never imagined when I was in my 20s. And now we are just like any other family, bonded by love. I just hope that we can inspire in our kids resilience, faith, and always, always hope for a better future. As my granny would say, where there's a will, there's a way. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One more thank you to our sponsors, Alpha Specialty Pharmacy, NIH Credit Union, and Care First. Thank you so much. And please let me thank Stephanie Garibaldi, our fantastic storytelling coach. I know you can't wait for our next year's show. So if you liked what you saw here tonight, check out Story Extreme is it Murphy's Pub in Alexandria. Stephanie hosts storytelling shows every month. Perhaps you might want to pitch your own story and get on the stage yourself. It's, as you can see, it's a really incredible experience to be on this stage. And if you haven't yet, next year we might come and recruit you. Let's get our incredible cast back on this stage. Hillary Sumba, Gabe Albernaz, Hasib Shinwari, Ed Bunny Rich, Nora Morales, and Cesar Palacios. Let's give them all one more hand. Thank you so much.